for forgiveness. Everyone forgives and supports the pastor. But there's no consequences for this behavior. And nobody, unless it's the survivor's family, is supporting the survivor. The survivor is just inconvenient. The survivor is meaningless to these people. Forgiveness can be beautiful. I've seen many people forgive somebody who's killed or harmed their kids, who experience no remorse for their actions, but still forgive because they don't want this feeling inside of them anymore. Some people have difficulty separating healthy, negative feelings from feelings that make them uncomfortable. There is a deep problem in church where churches and religion overall teaches that people should not be angry. People should not be enraged or have negative feelings. There are many denominations of Christianity that believe if you're angry, you're sinning. Anger, if understood and kept in check, can be a response to a grave misuse or a grave behavior. But when you grow up in an environment like Christianity, especially where I've grown up in, forgiveness always comes after somebody repenting of something they probably should be in prison for. What about, instead of forgiving people, maybe we need to start holding people accountable? And there's a difference between somebody making a mistake that doesn't cause harm to people. I mean, if you don't have to forgive people for cheating on you, stealing from you, trying to groom, exploit your kids. But religion says, regardless of the remorse or the behavior of the guilty party, you must forgive. This is a silencing technique. There's nothing wrong with forgiveness as long as it's not required. As long as nobody shames you for not doing it, and as long as you make the choice that makes you whole, not the person who wronged you, not the church, not your family, you. If forgiveness makes you whole, and it's a healthy, safe thing to do, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you don't feel whole by forgiving, you don't have to do it. You can try it if you want to, but a lot of people, forgiveness is a trigger. It makes them relive abuse. And in a lot of churches, forgiveness is a detour instead of there being legitimate consequences, temporary or long-term consequences. Forgiveness is the get out of jail free card. And when people, pastors, have done misconduct against ladies or children as young as 10 years old, the victims are forced to forgive. I've read stories on MSN where if a sister tells their parents that her brother is touching her inappropriately and he's removed from the home, the family pressures her to forgive and let him come home so he can start again. There's a lot of familial pressure, condemnation, and toxic, unhealthy behavior surrounding forgiveness. Sometimes forgiveness is complete removal of that person from your life. Sometimes the most healthy option for people is to go no contact. Just don't internalize negative feelings. If you cannot forgive somebody because forgiveness triggers you or it's not right for you, just make sure not to internalize negative feeling. It's okay to be mad, angry, furious. Don't let your negative feelings harm your body or your happiness. All the people in my life, I've chosen not to forgive because forgiveness is very triggering for me, and it would be unhealthy for me to forgive because I equate forgiveness with no accountability. I don't think there's a right answer for what to do as long as it's not hurting you and it's not impacting your inner peace. But why does religion command people to forgive? Why is there such an emphasis on forgiveness? Because it goes straight to the Bible. Teachings in Christianity emphasize the importance of forgiveness. They use Jesus as an example because Jesus commanded people to forgive us. If you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven by God. Forgiveness involves letting go of grudges and resentments, or at least that's what they teach, freeing the forgiver and the forgiven from chains of past wrongs. Now, if this is why you want to forgive somebody, that's perfectly fine. But there should never be an expectation, an emphasis, or any negative pushback if you choose not to. Don't use forgiveness as in walking on eggshells response to chronic abuse. Sometimes the best way to forgive is forgive yourself. And I've met a lot of people in therapy. Instead of forgiving the people who harmed them, they forgive themselves. Because you can't live in a culture and not internalize victim shaming. Sometimes the only forgiveness you need is to forgive yourself because you didn't deserve how people treated you, and maybe you made choices that made it harder to hold people accountable when you were a child. But you can't change the past. You can forgive yourself and move on. You can move on by setting boundaries where you no longer want to see that person anymore, where they lose fellowship with you and your family. Sometimes consequences of abusive behavior is that the grandparents are not allowed near their grandchildren. But it should never be done out of revenge. It should be done for the best of everyone involved. And if a situation doesn't make you a better person, then fix this. Sometimes the only forgiveness you need is the permission to forgive yourself. To tell yourself it wasn't your fault. There was little to nothing you could do to change it. And how you reacted is probably a product of the environment you were raised. And if you grew up in an environment like I did in Southern Baptist, you're not taught about abuse. You're not taught about boundaries, autonomy. You weren't taught that you deserve better and that you shouldn't put up with this. Sometimes the only forgiveness survivors need is to forgive themselves. You don't have to forgive anybody, but I think everyone deserves to forgive themselves, even if you have no reason to blame yourself. People still do. And I don't like forgiveness because in the culture I was raised, it was used as I don't have to have accountability today. And it very much triggers my religious trauma syndrome, which is something we'll get into later. But if forgiveness re-traumatizes you, then don't. If forgiveness causes a breach with people's relationships, then don't. If forgiveness is all about the other person and it's not about you, maybe find another way. Forgiveness is always about the person who forgives. And if you choose not to forgive because somebody doesn't change, has no remorse, and doesn't have a change in consistent, healthy behavior, sometimes it's best just to walk away. You're not any less of a good person when you choose not to be a doormat. And if you have healthy autonomy, sovereignty, and a view of how you want your life to be, sometimes it's without that person. Nobody deserves your time, your money, your affection, your forgiveness, or access into your life. It has to be earned. And just because someone brings you into this world does not mean they deserve forgiveness. Just because you had a life with somebody doesn't mean they deserve a second chance. People should be grateful they got a first chance. Sometimes it's best not to ask for a second chance. Let the person you've wronged decide if it's good for them to give you a second chance. But nobody deserves or should expect forgiveness. There should be no entitlement, because the person who needs forgiveness does not have the moral high ground. They have no ground is what they have. They're lucky that the person isn't a violent person. Because in some places, they hit you for wrong.